daily updates ni meso so baso abomode and subscribe to channel na feel like video no share na for adwenche so bra comment box ni bejibre na yakinkan ediama na honorable at Forson na say or reply honorable afenyoma na o chese enya de say parliament on mo mbesi wonum na o ka se mi so am speaker ati say me speaker enye dey emfi afenyoma mpo say time anu di akoniaba Supreme Court no nim so no ane oga isi almost we draw mo time afidie usu demand say parliament MBA kwan emamuntim nye dey enko na monko ye adwuma ona o ka che speaker say my speaker anye dey emfi afenyo mark mpo na speaker so dey to aso say we know afenyo mark nkra wo bu nanim tia because asem we see omuka de oso omuka bia a wenti nti afidie o pa Chelsea yembra parliament embe dey na o ka che NPP for ni NDC for say monhwe so na monkoye mo campaign e ma mo parties mo a mo constituency mo hia se mo ye campaign ho na monko campaign monko campaign e ma mo parties no nti after election no de oba parliament say unu pa Chelsea yembra parliament sisi ene de ono wonya sa time no nti amu bi akwan monkoye mo campaign nti after election mo bia mo wi na ye hu se party we na we no afidie sebi nyansa be bo bia etirim kam hu ni nkoti odo ya free nsem ye baba ne ba de obi ade beto am so
leader in this 8th parliament. In fact, that's also another issue that we're seeing right now, because we've cited a letter as well from Dr. Kesi Forson, who in fact it came on the letterhead of the majority caucus in this 8th parliament, but the details of it was not that of Alexander Fenyomakin, but Dr. Kesi Forson as well. So it appears that matter of who is majority in this 8th parliament has not been settled as yet. But this attempt to recall parliament to sit tomorrow, that's Thursday the 28th, and Friday the 29th, was triggered by Alexander Fenyomakin and some members of the NPP and caucus in parliament, sending a memo to the speaker. And it contained this request that a number of what has been described by them as urgent government business is suffering as a result of parliament being adjourned sine die. These were the businesses that they talked about. First off, the request for tax exemptions, as we're saying there, and designated for the companies under the One District, One Factory initiative. Also, the Ghana Financial Stability Fund and International Development Association facility of $250 million. In fact, this Financial Stability Fund had the sole aim of cushioning the financial institutions that were heavily impacted by this domestic debt exchange program. In the absence of this, you can understand how a number of these financial institutions and insurance companies are having to maneuver to stay afloat and alive. But that is also still on the ice as a result of Parliament being on recess, or in fact being adjourned sine die. The consideration of the president's nominations for appointment as justice of the Supreme Court. There are 2 Supreme Court nominees that have not been approved by the plenary as yet, because Parliament is on, that's been adjourned sine die. Ratification of the mining lease agreement between Ghana and that's the Ashanti Bauxite Company Limited for the mining of bauxite in the Nyenyenyene Block 2 area in Chimamponwa. That's not the only one. And there's another mining lease agreement which is still before Parliament, not approved as yet. The Barari DV Ghana Limited for the exploitation of lithium at Esuem in the central region. And some bills, including the Environmental Protection Agency bill, that bill that has that commitment that was made by government to have the LI 2462 that permits mining in forest reserves be, as it were, revoked. that is still on our books as a result of what's happening in Parliament. Social Protection Bill 2023, a number of bills as well intending to merge some institutions still on the ice and still before Parliament, not approved as yet. Now, this was the demand that Alexander Pendream sent to have the Speaker consider Parliament sitting tomorrow, the 28th and the 29th. Then, the minority, in fact, you have the NDC caucus in Parliament as well, also writing, urging the Speaker not to heed to this call by the MPP to recall Parliament. This is Kwabena Tahir Hammond, who is a Minister for Trade and Industry, Member of Parliament for the Asqua constituency, and he had this to say when the Speaker declined this request by their leader. Take a look.
The Speaker is in the pocket of the NDC. We thought that the Speaker probably will just recall Parliament and the NDC will stay away. But some of us also thought that, well, knowing who he is and what he has now become, it was likely that he would hack in to the cries of the NDC and its apparatchik. I wish him well. Let him go on behave unconstitutionally.
So that's Katie Hammond says, well, in his view, the Speaker's response denying, in fact, that call by the NPP to have Parliament recalled is because the Speaker is in the pocket of the NDC. That's Katie Hammond's verdict. This is what the Speaker said, that Alexander Pendream, as you may be aware, the performance of the functions of Parliament and the duties of members of Parliament extends beyond the plenary sittings of Parliament. Again, the parliamentary calendar acknowledges elections, campaign periods. This season is for the government, parties, and both presidential and parliamentary candidates to present their manifestos to the people and to account and justify how the mandate given them by the voters for the 4-year term of office has been applied to the benefit of the people. And he writes to Pendream, bearing in mind the provisions of Article 296A and B of the Constitution and the closeness of your proposed dates, that's 28, 29 November, to the general election on the 7th December, he, as Speaker, is of the considered view and opinion that it will not be in the national interest to interrupt campaigns of members and parties by a recall to plenary sitting of Parliament. This was one of the major considerations that the Speaker took in arriving at that decision not to grant that call by Alexander Pendream to have Parliament recalled tomorrow, 28th and 29th. But you see, beyond all this, the germane question in here as well is whether or not if the Speaker had granted this request by Alexander Pendream, if he, as leader, was going to be able to marshal his MPs from across the country who are thick and neck deep in their campaigning 10 days to this crucial election. That's a fundamental question in there. But there's a provision both in the standing orders of Parliament and in the Constitution that sought to back and support what the Speaker has done right now. Dennis Poberi Wadam Squires with me right here. Dennis, what does the orders of Parliament, in fact, the standing orders of Parliament say?
Well, so under the standing orders of Parliament, there are a number of ways that Parliament can be recalled. So we have seen the majority leader in the past try to invoke the provisions of the standing order to have Parliament recalled under one instance where he attached signatures of some particular MPs because the order under which he came required a certain number of MPs to have appended their signature for that recall to happen. So when you look at the provisions under the Order 53(1) and 2 of Parliament, there is a heading that says that meeting by request, into brackets of Article 1123 of the 1992 Constitution. What it means is that this order is founded on that provision of the Constitution. And one says that despite any other provision, 15% of members of Parliament may request a meeting of Parliament, and the Speaker shall, within 7 days after the receipt of the request, summon Parliament. The 2 says that Parliament shall convene within 7 days after the issuance of the notice of summons. So it means that cumulatively, this process will take roughly 14 days to happen. Now, when you look at this closely, it gives you some requirements that need to be met. One, there have to be some 15% of the members of parliament who have accented their signatures to the request that has been made. Two, it has to be within 7 days for the speaker to give a notice, and parliament shall be convened within 7 days after the notice has been served. That is just one leg of it. What we have seen in circulation now with respect to the majority leader's request does not come with the signatures and this request. In fact, he quotes the law under which he comes. And we'll look at that pretty shortly. So this is an extension of the first leg of it, which makes reference to a constitutional provision. So this is the constitutional provision on which the Order 53 is founded.
Okay.
Now, this is the order under which the majority leader comes under. He comes under Orders 57.3 and 4 of the Parliament Standing Orders.
Okay.
Which reads, 4 says that the Speaker may summon a meeting of the House before the date or time to which the House has been adjourned, or at any date or time after the House has been adjourned sine die. 4 says that the Speaker shall summon Parliament within a period determined by the Speaker, and the requirement for a 14-day notice shall not apply where this is an emergency.
Okay.
So the majority leader comes under this, effectively saying that I know that using the 14-day period, we may not be in time. Mind you, in this particular one, he actually proposes that Thursday and Friday should have been the days for the sitting. And if he had gone under the previous one, what it means is that that would not work. And if you look at the reading, Alfred, of the earlier provision, you will see something like Parliament shall convene. However, when you look at the Order 57.3, it says that the Speaker may. So you hear a conversation about the Speaker having to exercise some discretion as to whether to convene the House or not. And clearly, when you read the Speaker's memo to the leader of government business, for some reason, the Speaker does not describe Alexander Afenyo-Markin as majority leader, even though Alexander Afenyo-Markin wrote in his capacity as majority leader and leader of government business. The Speaker responds by only addressing him as leader of government business.
That points something to you, does it?
Yes, that signals something. But that's just besides the point. For this context, the Speaker talks about how he is unable to exercise his discretion in this particular instance in favor of a meeting that should be tomorrow and on Friday, because election is close. Here. Governments, members of parliament would have to meet their constituents to present to them their manifestos, even though the majority leader thought it was beyond that. He actually wanted them to show to Ghanaians that beyond what had happened at the Supreme Court and all that, there's still unity in parliament. But the Speaker, unfortunately, doesn't think otherwise. But this is the law backing it, Alfred.
I see. And so the Speaker is within the law in doing this, because you hear Andy Apiakobe is saying that the Speaker really had no business in taking this path. But based on what you have indicated, it's not really binding on the Speaker. He exercises his discretion because the wording there is that the Speaker may, and not shall. Okay, but let's have a conversation on this. Dr. Rashid Rahman, Executive Director of the Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs, joining us on Zoom right now. Appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. Now, you've been following this quite close. We've been with you every step of the way. Does this come to you as a surprise? I'm sure not, isn't it?
Not indeed, as Alfred. It didn't come as a surprise. I mean, if you follow the series of events, right from when this crisis broke out, I think you don't need to be a prophet to predict that we could come to this kind of outcome. You know, at the beginning of this crisis, a lot of us cautioned Parliament and the actors that this really required some kind of political solution. And I remember, even in some of our conversations, I did indicate that in order for us to get out of this crisis, we needed the leaders of the three arms of government, that is the Speaker, the Chief Justice, and His Excellency the President, convening and maybe together with the two leaders of the two caucuses, because, you know, that was needed in order to avert a situation like this where we got to a point where everybody is following legal procedure in order to justify their action. because when you get to that point, I think it becomes quite difficult. I mean, everything gets derailed one way or the other. And, you know, I have seen this happen in some parliaments. And in fact, at the beginning of this 8th parliament, I think I had the occasion of sharing some experiences from Southern Africa with some of the leaders that if care was not taken and then we didn't have some compromise and consensus, we were going to end up with a lot of legal matters that could disturb the functioning of Parliament. And this is where we are.
See, this is where we are. I can recall Dr. Sidoman, you proposed at the beginning of all this what you described as a negotiated compromise. And from how things are playing out now, that has not happened, and clearly it may not happen, is it not?
It was ever, because we hear snipers here and there in the media about, you know, some attempts and so on. I mean, whether they really happened or not, the outcome, I mean, it doesn't point to any kind of solution that was reached, because even as both caucuses are calling themselves the majority. I was on your program earlier today, this evening, with Honorable Kofi Adams, and he kept referring to Honorable Afenyomakin as the minority leader, which means that his leader is a majority leader. Even if at this point we still don't have that settlement, I think it presupposes that not very much effort. And you know, Alfred, at the beginning of this, I was saying if we had our elders in this country, that was the time that we really needed them. But nobody took that seriously, because, you know, if this matter, I mean, is not resolved, even when Parliament is recalled after the elections, we are still going to see some drama, because who is going to sit where? Everybody is calling themselves majority. Maybe the elections might sober one group or the other, and then at that point, it becomes irrelevant wherever you sit. But, you know, I can tell you the drama is not over. And again, in this one, there are serious lessons to be learned.
And you see, that's where the answer, this other concern is. Yes, the Speaker has indicated that, well, you know what, I'm going to consider the elections as a topmost priority, and so as a result, I would rather let the elections pass. Then you would have full concentration, because 10 days to election, there's even that doubt whether Alexander Afenyomakin himself, who was asking Parliament to be recalled to sit tomorrow and Friday, would be able to marshal all his colleagues, the 137 MPP MPs, to be in Parliament tomorrow to do this urgent business because of this crucial election that they are all neck deep in. But then you raised the concern as well that if that issue of who is majority is not clearly settled, no matter the time this Parliament reconvenes, it's still going to be an issue, is it not?
Yes, indeed. So, Alfred, the lesson that this is teaching us is that it looks like the court's involvement in the space of Parliament has its limitations. You know, maybe the court can make a pronouncement, but I believe that if it's not accompanied by or preceded by some negotiation, you are still going to have a situation where an entire caucus, 137 or so members, would go into the House and say that this is where we are going to sit. I mean, are we going to cite all of them for contempt and jail all of them? I mean, jail a whole kind of one half of our political kind of group in the House. So that is where a lot of care needs to be taken in terms of how much the court, I mean, gets involved in this. But in this particular case, Alfred, I've been saying that, you know, I don't blame the courts. I mean, they were invited into that space by by members of parliament themselves, and whatever action that is taken today, it sets, a precedent that people are going to stand on tomorrow. And so in parliamentary language, we say that minorities change, which means that, today one group might be in a minority or in a majority, but tomorrow, especially in our case, we are close to elections. We don't know what these elections are going to produce. So that you live with, if you are not careful, some of the things that you started when you were either in minority or when you were in majority. And so that's why, too much kind of invitation by Parliament to the court to come into its space is not healthy. On rare occasions, yes, we can have, as happens everywhere, judicial kind of reviews. But in this eighth Parliament, I think we got to a point where it was becoming rather the norm, and instead of being the exception. We've seen so many instances. I think about 3, 4, if I can count. And this can only disturb parliamentary proceedings, if not weaken the hand of Parliament. Because already the 3 arms of government, Parliament, the executive and the judiciary, are supposed to stand on equal legs. So in the separation of powers, I think we say that the 3 arms are equal. But as has been described by many over the years, the wobbly one, the weak one, has always been Parliament. Because you get a situation where whenever either party is in power, it looks like there's a lot of executive calling the shot.
Right.
And Parliament failing to really provide the needed oversight, maybe because of the party system, because of the constitutional arrangements and so on. So over the years, many have said that if there's any weak kind of link in our separation of powers, is Parliament. And then you have a situation now where the executive can tell Parliament, don't bring this bill that you passed, and then Parliament will say nothing about it. And then the court will tell Parliament, this is how you have to do your work. So it only adds to the perception that, Parliament is a weak link. And I think that even the Speaker himself, recently before these events, in the alumni lectures that he gave in Legon, I think he made reference to the fact that he thinks the institution is the weakest of the 3.
Right.
I don't know what he's going to say today. After these events of the last few weeks.
Well, I appreciate you, and thank you very much, Dr. Rashid Rahman, for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. And as the speaker has deferred to after